Kvod Harabanim, sehr verehrter Herr Bundestagspräsident,
Bundestag President,
sehr geehrte Repräsentanten der
representatives of the constitutional organs, members of the German Parliament,
Frau Bundeskanzlerin,
Madam Chancellor, Federal President, Ms. Budenberger,
Damen und Herren.
ladies and gentlemen,
Ich stehe vor Ihnen
I stand before you
als stolze Deutsche,
as a proud German,
wie einst meine Großmutter
like
Albertine
my
Neuland
grandmother,
angedenkt ist.
Albertine Neuland, blessed be her memory, once did,
Treu ihrer
who
deutschen
along
Heimat verbunden,
with my grandfather was steadfastly loyal to her German homeland.
der Bayreuther
She was well respected in the business community of Bayreuth, a passionate Wagnerian,
ermordet in Theresienstadt
murdered
im
in
Januar
Theresienstadt in January 1944.
Von meiner Großmutter habe ich
From
die
my
Liebe für
grandmother,
Menschen,
I inherited a love of people,
für Menschen.
despite people.
Ich stehe als stolze
I stand
Deutsche vor
before
Ihnen,
you as a proud German,
wie einst mein gottseliger Vater
like
Fritz Neuland.
my blessed father Fritz Neuland once did. He was a loyal German patriot in 1919, deeply outraged by the Treaty of Versailles, a decorated veteran of the World War I, who fought for his German fatherland at the front. His loyalty, his Iron Cross, did not protect him from any humiliation under the National Socialists, not from being banned from his profession, not from expropriation, not from his mother being deported, not from being separated from his daughter, not from forced labor. My father taught me to love Germany despite this. On the 9th of November 1938, Germany threw open the gate to Auschwitz before the eyes of the world and with the support of large sections of the population, even their applause. The National Socialists' hatred and indifference sealed the fate of millions of Jews in Europe. On the 27th of January 1945, the Red Army liberated the Auschwitz-Birkenau annihilation camp. Indifference gave way to the certainty of a singular, unprecedented, and to this day almost unimaginable crime against humanity. 76 years later, I am sharing with you in the Bundestag something of my life, a German life. I was born in Munich at the end of October 1932. A self-confidence among Jewish people in this city emerged after generations of discrimination and persecution, and it found expression in 3 synagogues. Most German Jews were German patriots. They wanted to assimilate, wanted to belong. When Hitler came to power, I was 3 months old. But even adult friends and acquaintances failed to grasp the devastation of the day he came to power. Some 500,000 German Jews were too deeply rooted in their homeland to have doubts. Jews had been living on this soil for over 1,600 years then, and since 1871 as equal citizens with equal rights. And the law was the law, after all, or wasn't it? When I was 4 years old, my mother left us. She gave in to the pressure put on her for converting and marrying a Jew. What she left behind was pain. My grandmother moved in with us. She wanted to give me as normal a life as she could. We played, sang, laughed. She taught me the foundations of our faith, but no amount of effort could hide the fact that life was becoming more and more difficult for us Jews. Decrees, prohibitions, defamation made everyday life unbearable. One afternoon, I wanted to go out and play. I often met the girls and boys from our neighborhood in the courtyard opposite. One day, the gate was locked. I called to them. They turned away. From behind, the caretaker's wife bawled out at me, "Jewish children are not allowed to play here." Tears sprang to my eyes. At home, Grandma sat me on her lap. It was pointless to make light of what I'd experienced. She spoke to me of dark times that would soon pass. It was my first encounter with being othered. After that, I was no longer allowed to leave the house alone. The dark times did not soon pass. In 1938, they became darker and darker. Since spring, I'd been going to the Jewish school. I'd been looking forward to learning so much, but now fear sat with me in the classroom. My way to school was a misery, being called names and hassled. No matter how strong you tried to be, exclusion and hostility leave deep wounds. By the end of the 30s, Aryanization was in full swing. Jewish businesses and professional livelihoods were being systematically destroyed in plain sight, at the heart of German society. By then, our lives were confined to home, but privacy no longer existed. Most of the time, it was evening, when it was dark and Jews were forbidden to leave the house, that they would lean on the doorbell. Men in long coats would prowl through the flat as if it was their own. Porcelain, carpets, cutlery, paintings, antiques, candlesticks, they would take whatever they wanted and hand us receipts, meticulously. Germany. Harassment, threats, insults, and not only verbal violence became the usual way of treating Jews. Fear, uncertainty, intimidation accompanied every thought, and the anxious question of what would happen next. One day, my father and I wanted to get some air. Men jumped off a wagon and said, "You come with us." Father was dragged from my hand. A woman I didn't know grabbed my hand and put my hand on her pram and walked with me a little way. At home, I waited with grandmother. Terrible hours. Later, my father returned, and we had been lucky one more time. Let me say this clearly here. Anyone who compares the COVID measures with the National Socialist policy towards Jews is trivializing that anti-Semitic state terror and the Shoah, and that is unacceptable.
Das ist inakzeptabel.
It is unacceptable. In June 1938, Hitler visited Munich. The main synagogue caught his eye. The next day, he ordered it to be demolished. Steel balls and demolition blasts razed this house of worship to the ground. The 9th of November. That evening, we left the flat in a hurry. No time for questions. I wandered through the streets, holding my father's hand. Noise, shouting, smoke billowing out of the windows of the Old Jakob synagogue. 2 SA men were dragging Justice Councillor Rothschild, Grandpa Rothschild as I called him, from his home. Blood was running down his face. I wasn't allowed to stop. I mustn't stumble, I mustn't cry, I mustn't attract attention. When the Wehrmacht invaded Poland, I was 7. Once the war started, the chances of Jews being able to leave their German homeland was close to 0. My uncle in New York managed to organize 2 sponsorships. Just 2. According to US regulations, grandmother was too old. She wanted us two to leave. Father and I would have never left her. End of story. I heard what people said when they came to visit my father. Since he was disbarred from practicing law, he was working as a legal advisor for Jewish clients. They talked about their relatives who'd been deported to the Dachau concentration camp. I didn't understand everything, but I did understand. It was a matter of life and death. We had to move into the basement with only a few belongings. Our last, seemingly safe place was gone. Since November 1941, trains had been leaving Munich, heading east. In them, Jewish inhabitants of Munich of all ages crammed together. Acquaintances and friends disappeared forever. More and more desperate people asked my father for help. With deportation orders in their hands, they would cry, scream, beg. I can still hear their voices today. But Father couldn't help them. No one could help them. And we all knew it. I was 9 when we were informed that a transport of old people and children was going to Theresienstadt. Either grandmother or I had to be on that train. My strong grandmother instantly made an impossible decision. Early the next day, Father would take me away, hopefully to safety. Before that, the most difficult moment of my life. Grandmother said she was going to a health spa and would be back soon. I knew what she meant, though. Crying, I clung to her, clinging to love and tenderness and comfort. All would be banished from my life for a long time to come. My father took me to a village in Franconia, southern Germany. The family of Sensi Hummel, who used to be my uncle's maid, took me in as her illegitimate child. I had to say goodbye to Father, perhaps forever. I became Lotte Hummel. I got used to an outhouse, a wash basin, hot water shared by everyone, sparsely furnished freezing cold rooms, manual labor, and fear, homesickness, and unspeakable loneliness. Sensei was a strictly religious woman. She had made a pact with God. If she protects me, her brothers will return home safely from the war. And that is what happened. At the end of May 1945, I was driving to the farm with Alte, the lead cow, in front of the cart. A car stopped. My father was standing in front of me. It was not a light-hearted reunion. To this day, I can only imagine the torture they inflicted on him. Acid had almost completely destroyed his eyesight. But he was alive, and I was alive. I did not want to go back to Munich, back to the people who had insulted us, spat on us, showed us in every possible way how much they suddenly hated us. But I had no choice. And so I encountered them all. I wanted to get out of this city, out of this country. At 16, I met Samuel Knobloch from Poland. His mother and 5 of his brothers and sisters had been murdered in the ghetto. In Plaszow concentration camp, they shot his father in front of his eyes. He and his brother Ruben survived Plaszow and Buchenwald and the death march south. On the 8th of May 1945, they were liberated by Russian soldiers. Samuel was the love of my life. We got together and wished for nothing more than a new life together in the new world. For our emigration, I learned dressmaking to get a visa. Every 2 days, we looked for our names on the immigration permit list. At the end of 1951, my son Bernd was born. As soon as he could walk, we were going to leave. They say, if you want to make God laugh, make plans. St. Louis, Missouri, the destination of our immigration, never laid eyes on me. We had 2 more daughters, Sonia and Iris. Coexisting in silence with the non-Jewish environment, the Jewish community then tried to shape a life from merely having survived. A life that had been taken from 6 million daughters, sons, brothers, sisters, mothers, fathers, grandparents. A life of mourning, of pain, of anger, a life in Germany. But homeland is homeland. It was not until the 1960s and 1970s that the silence was broken. On the non-Jewish side, there was a growing awareness of the crimes of the past. There was a growing realization that critically engaging with the past and confronting it were crucial for building a future. And this helped to increase trust on the Jewish side in the new Federal Republic of Germany, which succeeded in building a sustainable liberal democracy on the ruins of history, a positive player in a united Europe, in the liberal world, a state that upholds and defends the inviolable human rights of each and every individual. I began to get involved, at first socially in my own religious community, and then increasingly working to turn coexistence into togetherness, a huge undertaking for the society. We built bridges across seemingly insurmountable chasms. Today, there are Jewish communities all over the country again, often small, but they're there, and they're here to stay, despite all the setbacks. New synagogues have been built. In my hometown, the Jewish House of God once again forms a symbiosis with the Church of Our Lady in the City Hall. Jewish schools, academic posts, study groups, sport clubs, rabbinical seminaries, a multitude of institutions, associations, and groups bear witness to this. Pluralistic, vital German Jewish life is again a recognized force in our society. The immigration of Jewish quota refugees from the post-Soviet region finally showed the world at the end of the 20th century Germany has become a good, promising country for Jews again. Today, I thank God for allowing me to work on giving Jewish life in Germany a lasting perspective. I thank the vast majority of people in our country who wish for just that. And I thank my fellow campaigners in politics and society who have helped me in this endeavor, unflinchingly, courageously, steadfastly. We can be proud of our Federal Republic of Germany, ladies and gentlemen, but we must defend it. We mustn't forget for a single day how fragile the precious achievements of the last 76 years are. I don't need to give you a chronology of anti-Semitic incidents in our country. They occur openly, brazenly, and almost daily. Conspiracy myths are becoming ever more popular. Anti-Jewish convictions and hate speech are getting votes again, are socially acceptable again, in school right through to the COVID demonstrations. And of course on the internet, the pressure cooker for hatred and incitement to violence against minorities of all kinds. To everyone here, let me say that in 2021, we are looking back at 1,700 years of Jewish life documented on the soil of today's Federal Republic of Germany. I thank the federal government, the state government, and the local authorities for their support of the initiatives to mark this occasion. But I struggle with the fact that the wish for happiness and normality is still mingled with old fears and concerns. Fellow congregants, friends, and acquaintances of mine still think aloud about emigrating from Germany after all. Strong political support is important. Many thanks go to the security forces who protect the Jewish communities and their institutions. But there's a gap between political rhetoric and the reality in our society, especially since some are not prepared to engage in painful analysis. There's no doubt the greatest danger facing everyone in our country remains right-wing extremism. And of course, radical right-wing convictions are a major force promoting the hatred against Jews. Anti-Semitism is also deeply rooted in left-wing extremism. Jihadism, a threat from radical Islamist hatred of our way of life, has been added to the mix. The hostile image of the Jew symbolizes the hated West, modernity, liberality. Thus, Jews and their institutions are regularly targets of terrorism. But the phenomenon of anti-Semitism is bigger than the obvious. If you want to get to the root of hatred against Jews, you have to tackle it where it hurts, at the heart of society as well, where integration into democratic values is rejected. Also where intolerance has been allowed to ferment under the guise of tolerance for too long. Also where anti-Semitism is disguised and presented as an intellectual stance. And where the word Jew is not used, but Zionist or other code words. Also where the state of Israel is defamed, delegitimized, and judged with double standards. The fight against anti-Semitism is a Sisyphean task. But if you don't want to get used to having machine guns outside Jewish institutions, you have to tackle it. I wish a yarmulke did not have to be covered up here, that a necklace with a Star of David pendant could be worn as safely as a cross, and a Maccabi jersey like a Bayern football jersey. It's not just about protecting Jewish people, for where anti-Semitism takes root, all forms of hatred can grow. Racism, homophobia, sexism, hatred of any kind of minority. The fight against it is a fight for human dignity, for democracy, for unity, for justice and freedom. Ladies and gentlemen, in Germany, as elsewhere, we are witnessing division, polarization, aggressive agitation, intransigence. Some argue that there are corridors of opinion. This is an important debate that must not be misused to make monstrous things utterable. Words are the precursors of action. When the limits of the great goods of freedom of expression and freedom of assembly are being defined, the idea behind Article 18 of Germany's basic law must be given more consideration. It is untenable that the things left undone by the legislature and the judiciary are placed on the shoulders of the police. On a personal note about the police, as a child, I was harassed and beaten by men in German uniforms because I didn't want to say where my father was. For years now, I've been protected by officers of the Munich Police Department with their lives. On behalf of my family, let me say in this August Assembly, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I had lost my homeland. I fought for it, I regained it, and I will defend it. I stand before you as a proud German, although everything seemed to contradict that. And there's still much that contradicts it. Grief, pain, despair, and loneliness are my companions. But I know our country is doing a lot to ensure that Jewish people are safe and hopefully will never be abandoned again. I am proud of our democracy, even if, and this is hardly a secret, I would like to see it robuster. The enemies of democracy are stronger than many believe. I am proud of the young people in our country. They are free of guilt in connection with the past, but they bear responsibility for today and tomorrow. And they're interested, passionate, and courageous. Ladies and gentlemen, I stand before you as a mother, a grandmother, a great-grandmother, a Munich native, a Bavarian, a German, a European, a Jewish woman, as a human being. I beg of you, take care of our country. I'm explicitly not addressing these words to the far right of the plenary. I cannot pretend it doesn't worry me that you are sitting here. I'm not addressing you as a group, because perhaps there may yet be one or other of you who can grasp the footsteps you are following in here. As for the rest of your movement, you will continue to fight for your Germany, and we will continue to fight for our Germany. And I say to you, you lost your fight 76 years ago. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to conclude with 3 thoughts. My first thought goes to the millions of victims we are commemorating today. They are in our hearts. They will not be forgotten, never. The second is for the people who witnessed it firsthand. Many have told of inconceivable horrors at this very lectern. We now hand over the baton of remembrance to you, trusting that we place it in good hands. Do not forget us. My third thought goes to the young people. There is no better compass than your own hearts. Don't let anyone tell you who to love and who to hate. May God protect our country. Thank you for listening.